Is my camera in the right place?
It is. You look great.
Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Faith and Finance Forum, hosted by the Catholic Finance Association and presented by Aquinas Wealth Advisors. We have a wonderful guest with us today. Our friend John Singleton is with us from Baltimore, Maryland, Annapolis, Maryland. How you doing, John?
Hey, John, I'm delighted to be on your show today. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's our honor, and I believe Annapolis is a suburb or an exurb at least of Baltimore, right? I mean, is that fair to say?
Yeah, right. We're just to the east,
Yeah,
kind of a sailing town, kind of a naval academy town. We sponsor a mid at the Naval Academy, which is kind of traditional around
it's
here.
awesome.
So, yeah, great place to live.
And the capital of the state of Maryland, right? Isn't that
Is
the
the
case?
cap? That's the unfortunate part, but yes.
You guys like to talk about the Naval Academy more than the Capitol, it
Yeah,
seems a little
everything else with politics. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
bit. John, let's start with a prayer, shall we?
Yes,
Father,
absolutely.
Son, Holy Ghost, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy
Holy
Mary,
Mother of
Mother of
God,
God,
pray for us
pray for
sinners
us
now,
sinners,
at the hour of our
now at
death.
the hour of our death, amen.
Amen.
Saint John the Baptist, pray for
Pray
us.
for us.
Father, Son, Holy Ghost, amen. Well, John, so great to meet you. A bunch of our mutual friends said that you and I should talk. You are an entrepreneur and an IT guy and a family man and a
Yes,
Mount St. Mary's man and probably a
correct.
whole bunch of other stuff we're going to get into. But for starters, just tell us a little bit about where you're from, your family life, what makes you you. Love to listen a little bit.
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you for saying Hail Mary before we started the show. That's great because I did go to Mount St. Mary's. And there was an abbreviated form of the Hail Mary. Have you ever heard this one? Hail
No,
Mary, full of grace, punch the devil in the face.
yeah, I like that. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, that's a really quick one. Sometimes when I'm in a hurry, I do that one.
Yeah. No, I'll have to borrow that. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So yes, I wrote a book about Mount St. Mary's. The first book in I think over 100 years on the Mount. There is one other book, but it's more like a almost like a guest book or a sort of a history of people who arrived at the college or were part of the college, but it's not really in a narrative form. So anyway, I like to say I did the first book on Mount St. Mary's. That's a real page turner. So glad to have done it. I sent my older son to University of Notre Dame, and when I went into their bookstore right on campus, there's books on football and books on the Catholic Church, and of course, there's a whole wing just on Notre Dame, right? And I said, wait a minute, they've got a whole wing of their bookstore just on the traditions and the legends of Notre Dame. We don't have one at Mount St. Mary's, and we're older than them. We have a better founding story than them. And so I said, I'm going to write a book on Mount St. Mary's. I did it back in 2023, and it's been received well at the college. It sells well at the bookstore. It's available, electronically online. So I'm very delighted that I took that risk. And that's part of being an entrepreneur is taking risks and looking for places where your services are needed. So I feel like I really spotted a good opportunity there.
The name of the book is.
The name of the book is The Meaning of Mount St. Mary's. Here's a
Mm,
copy of it right there. It's a coffee table book. Uh,
cool.
it's a beautiful book. It features the art of a Mount St. Mary's graduate, a guy named John Lafarge, who is the premier stained glass artist, I think, ever in America. He was, of course, in the 1880s to maybe 1910 was the hallmark of his career. Just some beautiful art. Much of it, of course, is about Mary and Jesus. But I'm really lucky to have been able to put this book together and excited about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
and as far as you said, home life, I'm married. I have a
Yeah.
wonderful wife. I have three great kids, three sons, and one of them went to Notre Dame, and one went to Villanova, and one went to Catholic U. But Mount St. Mary's has a better founding story than any of those schools.
All right. You mentioned that twice in the last 4 minutes. So we have to drill down on that. Why is it a better
Okay,
founding story?
okay, all right. So it's the better founding story because it involves a cave and a mountain. Mount St. Mary's was founded in 1808. So it's the oldest Catholic school, the first Catholic school in the 50 states. You could say, what about Georgetown? People say that often. And I say, Georgetown was redistricted into a federal territory in 1791. There were only 13 states. Mount St. Mary's is the mother of Catholic education in the United States. And Georgetown really is located in Washington D.C. So that's a whole different story. Some people tell me. I also say that Mount St. Mary's is the first Catholic college named for the Mother of God, which it is. It's also the first United States college named for a woman. So I think that's also an interesting thing about our Catholic faith, is that we've always been very, very pro-woman. And some people say, well, what about William and Mary, John? Weren't they founded in 16 something? And I say, well, first of all, that was before we were the United States. And second of all, that's a college named for a man and a woman. That's a completely different story than a college named for a woman. So the Mount is is a really special place. The founding story is we had a priest who was living in Frederick. He was a refugee from the French Revolution when the clergy was being hunted in the streets and murdered by the revolutionary regime there. And so he came to America and made friends with both James Monroe and Patrick Henry when he landed in Virginia, learned about our Constitution, moved to Maryland, opened up some churches and some parishes, then had a vision of this school up in the mountains on a mountain. And he was actually coming back from a day of administering the sacraments. It was late. He saw a light on the mountain, rode his horse up there looking for lodging, a place to stay. Never found it. He ended up falling asleep and waking the next morning, and he was at the entrance of a large cave. When he looked into the cave, he had a vision for this school. And like many other great stories, Mount St. Mary's began with a cave. Plato's cave, of course, if you remember that from studying Plato, Homer's cave of the immortals. Christ broke the chains of death in a cave. Christ was born in a cave. Of course, Mary at Lourdes was seen in a cave. A cave connects the Mount to the greatest stories of all time, and it is the mother of Catholic education in the United States. So a cave is a kind of a creative force, and you saw from Mount St. Mary's this great Catholic tradition coming out of it, including the parochial system, which was founded in New York by Archbishop John Hughes, a student of John Dubois, the French priest who escaped the
Dagger
French
John,
Revolution.
right?
Dagger John,
Dagger.
famous. This guy was tough, right? I mean, he was a tough guy. He faced
Yeah.
the public school system in New York, fought them with lawsuits and political battles, and ended up being able to open the parochial system that was then replicated across the nation by the Third Plenary Council of Baltimore, which was primarily populated with Mount priests. So there you have two Mount connections. And then if you look back at the founding of the Mount in 1808 and St. Joseph's in 1809, Elizabeth Seton, who was a protege of John Dubois, that same French priest, the first American-born saint, she's founded St. Joseph's College right next to Mount St. Mary's, a women's school and a men's school. That formed the cradle of Catholic education in the United States. So all of these connections from Mount St. Mary's really formed Catholic education in the United States. That was really unrecognized before I wrote my book. And I think I'm now making that connection pretty strongly, and people are paying attention. So it's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, why do you think it took so long for somebody to write a book about Mount St. Mary's? I mean, you're right. With that rich heritage, I'm just surprised somebody didn't beat you to the punch.
Well, why are so many things about the Catholic history of America hidden in plain sight?
Yeah.
I went to during the writing of this book for the first time, and I live in Maryland. I went to St. Mary's, right? This was the place where the first Catholics came to Maryland
Mm,
from the British colony when they were, getting rid of their Catholic population.
yeah.
They came to Maryland in the 1600s. Well, if you go to St. Mary's City, which is a huge part of Catholic history in America, maintained by the state of Maryland, it's sinking into the ground. It's like Pompeii. It's completely neglected. And most people hardly know the story of St. Mary's City, which is where the first boat, the Ark and the Dove, the two boats that left England to come to Mary's Land, right? That's how it was advertised to the first Catholics. Of course, when they got here, the king said it really wasn't Mary's Land. It was named after a British royalty. It was named after a queen, not the Mother of God. But of course, the people who populated St. Mary's City, the Catholics, they named their city, St. Mary's City, their river, St. Mary's River, their armory, St. Mary's Armory, their county, St. Mary's County, as in Mary, the mother of God, not a queen, St. Mary, the Queen of Saints. So all these things are quite hidden from us. And if you trace the Catholics who moved into St. Mary's, many of them, Southern Maryland, right, made the trek all the way up to Emmitsburg, where Mount St. Mary's is, and that became this great Catholic enclave for many years, formed around the college in the wilderness of Maryland. So, yeah, our Catholic history is obscured from us for some strange reason, and it seems to me it's odd that a guy like me, who is not an academic, I'm not a PhD, I'm not a teacher, I'm an alumni of the school, and just started looking into this great history and said, wait a minute, we're the mother of Catholic education in the United States. We're the first Catholic college in the 50 states. We have all these connections to even higher education. The University of Notre Dame was actually the Bishop of Vincennes, which was Indiana, was another French priest escaping the revolution, Simon Berthet. And he actually acquired the land for the University of Notre Dame and recruited Edward Sorin, who's the founder of Notre Dame, another French priest. So, and we have connections to founding Catholic University, Seton Hall, Fordham, Spring Hill College, and many others. So, even in higher education, the Mount is kind of like the mother, the place where all of this energy was generated from.
Yeah, I didn't know any of that. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to attend Mount St. Mary's for college?
Oh, of course, by accident, right?
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
no, yeah, I'll short and sweet. I bombed out of engineering school at the University of Maryland,
Yeah.
and then I said, well, where am I going to go? And I happened to have gone to Our Lady of Good Counsel High School, and some of my friends were at Mount St. Mary's, and I ended up transferring there. And then I look back and say, wait a minute, my high school is named for Mary, and my college is named for Mary. I didn't plan any of this, and 20 years later, I write a book about Mount St. Mary's. So yeah, that was my, I guess my gift of gratitude for getting through college and not flunking out of Mount St. Mary's.
Yeah. And what was your student experience like at Mount St. Mary's? How would you describe it? Is it when you were there, was it a really like a really religious school? Was it like a place for athletes? I mean, like what was the vibe on campus?
Well, I think you have to remember the Mount has, I think, maybe the largest seminary in the country. It had
Right.
it right now. Even then, it had a pretty large seminary. I think it
Yeah.
had been the second largest at the time. I think it's grown. But so there was the seminary, and then there
Mm.
was the college. And the college, was a normal college, I think, in the 80s. I wasn't, actually, I did go to Mass quite often, but it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was a really powerfully evangelical Catholic school. I think what it did was it evangelized us with its beauty. I
Mm.
mean, if you go there, you can't help but be taken back by the mountain, by the trails that you can walk over, the canyons, swimming in the quarries, climbing trees. It's a beautiful place. And of course, there's a great gold statue of Mary up on the mountain. It's actually 1 foot taller than Notre Dame's Golden Dome of Mary. So we beat Notre Dame in that too.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just really the beauty will save the world, and Mary and her beautiful child Jesus, I think, are there. So I think that's really primarily how it did it, maybe for us non-seminary students, and certainly won us over eventually, right?
Gosh, I love your passion and your pride in the place. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Say the name of the book one more time, please, so everybody
Oh, the
hears
the
it.
meaning of Mount St. Mary's. There it is. One
Meaning
more
of Saint
time. Coffee
Meaning of
table
Mount St.
book.
Mary's, everyone.
Yeah.
Available wherever books are sold, I presume, right? You
Well,
can
it's
get this on
available at the
Amazon.
bookstore. I didn't do Amazon because,
Yeah.
Amazon, they want some huge part of it's like
Yeah.
the book doesn't even cost as much as Amazon wants in return for it. So
Yep.
we said,
Yep.
if somebody wants to get it, they can get it electronically, at the school website. So there we go.
Okay, so go to the Mount St. Mary's school website and you can
Yep.
you can purchase the book there. Okay, that's
Yes,
good
absolutely.
intel. Okay, excellent.
Yep.
Very cool. Gosh. What is Mount St. Mary's for known today in terms of its academic programs? Like, if I have, kids that are in high school, looking at colleges, why should they choose Mount St. Mary's other than the reasons you've already mentioned, the beauty, the heritage, the
Yeah.
spiritual life?
Yeah. The
What
outdoors.
programs is it known for? Yeah.
Yeah. I would say for the liberal arts education. I mean, the
Hmm.
liberal arts, to me have never been more important than in the last 5 years, because what the liberal arts has you do is to learn to ask good questions.
Yeah.
And what is the basis of any profession? Think about the medical profession or science. I mean, so, to know the science is to be able to ask questions, always ask questions, and find out better ways to do things. It's the same thing with the law. It's the same thing with business. There's an education school there. But I think what's really the heart of the program is these philosophy courses, these theology courses, literature courses, history courses. These are the things that really separate them out from other schools. We have a very strong core curriculum that is about half of the courses that you take on campus. Um, I remember we even had, when I was there, an interesting course on the JFK assassination
Oh, wow.
and the conspiracies around that. And
Interesting.
it was a magnificent course taught by at least the section I was in. It was by the mayor of Emmitsburg, which is a tiny town,
Wow.
but who was also a professor at the school. And it kept that Catholic interest in the Catholic president, of course, John
Yes.
Kennedy, and what really happened there, and it was really great for us. So you get really great courses like that when you go to a liberal arts school.
Yeah.
I studied business, and business was fine, but the courses that I remember are like the one that we just talked about, the
Yes.
course on Kennedy. These are things that you don't get anywhere else. Of course, the theology. I mean, the philosophy is indispensable. You can't get a philosophy or a theology course in a high school. You
Right.
can't get an art course in a high school now. So, and to have an art course, a course where you learn to sing or to draw or to sculpt, I mean, these things are all available at a liberal arts school, and they're the most human of things that we can learn to do, right? To use our voice, to use our talents to make art. I mean, this is an incredible thing. And we still have a great drama program, and I'm involved with that now as well. So I think it's a great. I would say the liberal arts curriculum is what you want. Otherwise, you never learn how to ask the right questions, and then all you do is take orders for your whole life, which we know is not a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really concerned about that. I mean, it seems like there's a real breakdown in the critical thinking skills, intellectual curiosity, and you're right, just kind of like the default of being obedient, like, hey, like, government website told me to do all this stuff, I better do it, I mean, you're absolutely right. And I love that Mount St. Mary's is pushing back in that, celebrating the classical liberal arts tradition and raising, helping to raise a generation of free thinkers and free citizens, right?
Oh, couldn't agree more that really is the most important thing. And we have to think there's a reason why all these courses have been cleansed from the curriculums. There's only a few colleges that even do this anymore, and it's invaluable. I found it invaluable in my life as a small business person, entrepreneur. You've got to constantly think for yourself. You've got to look for opportunities. You've got to think against the grain. You've got to cut against the grain. And when you do, you find all kinds of hidden gems,
Yeah.
right, that are there. But yeah, there's a strong push to keep people away from that. So yeah, we're pretty lucky at the amount that we've held on to that core, which also echoes back to our founding. It echoes back to the first priests who founded the Mount, who of course were integrally involved in teaching theology courses and philosophy courses. So we're all connected in that way back to our alumni, all the way back to the first days of the school, which is great.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, and you're right. I mean, just the to stretch back to the 18th century and with that 1808 founding, I mean that is some history because that was not a particularly welcoming time for the Catholic Church in the United States. The aforementioned Dagger John, built his old St. Patrick's Cathedral in Lower Manhattan like a fortress
Right.
because I mean he truly believed that he was going to have to fight, one of these days because the his fellow New Yorkers that were not Catholic were so hateful and bigoted against the Catholic Church. And of course, here in Philadelphia, St. Patrick, or excuse me, St. Peter and Paul Cathedral, the basilica is also very fortress-like, with
Yeah.
the stained glass windows very high. Again, built that way so they could overcome the throwing of Molotov cocktails and other projectiles. So in the midst of this kind of challenging era for Catholics in the United States, you had this institution rising up and being, like you said, the mother of the Catholic universities in America. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, you're right. You bring up a good point that John Hughes did lay the foundation stone, the cornerstone for St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. He was
Right.
very important. And of course, right across the street, interestingly enough, I don't know how many years later, 50 years later, of course, the black rocks of Rockefeller Center are right across the street, right in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral. I always thought that was an interesting contrast, right? The two buildings there, the beautiful white stones of St. Patrick Cathedral and the dark granite of the Rockefeller Center there.
No, I love that. And you also have the statue of Atlas, this kind of, looks like a kind of like a pagan statue a little bit, it's very,
We've seen that, we've noticed the same things. It's very, if you get there and you look at it, you're like, boy, this is a strange thing to put across the street from St. Patrick's Cathedral. So I guess maybe someone didn't love St. Patrick's
yeah,
Cathedral.
I think only more fitting contrast might be if that Wall Street Bull was right across the street from the St. Patrick's Cathedral, the contrast that would represent, the choice between gold and God, very interesting. Well,
Exactly.
okay, so you go to Mount St. Mary's, you have a great run there. It's obvious, you love going to school there. What came next for you post graduation?
So post graduation, I got into sales at AT&T. So of course, I started somewhere else. I actually, just like at Mount St. Mary's, I kind of fumbled into it. This is the
Yeah.
same kind of thing. I actually worked at the World Bank for like
Wow.
6 months
Oh my
in
gosh.
Washington, D.C.
Uh,
Did not like it, left, ended up going into sales at AT&T and, really liked it. And of course, that's where I met my wife, which was fantastic.
it's great.
And then we left there shortly after getting married, and then we started our own business and have been going along ever since, very happily, kind of independently, not having our customers are our bosses, but we don't have any middleman, so it's a lot better to to do the small business thing. I think that's one of the best ways to experience America, if you can, is to really have that freedom to be in your own business and
Yeah.
not answer to
100%.
so many different authorities, I guess, right?
Yeah, oh my gosh,
Uh,
it's the hardest thing. It's so challenging, but that freedom is priceless. You're absolutely right. So from leaving the World Bank to starting your own business, how much time was that? How many months or years was that?
so I left the world. That was my first job out of college. I
Yeah.
probably was there like 6 months.
Okay.
Really did not like it,
Yeah.
and then got married. I want to say 3 or 4 years later,
Okay.
and then 3 or 4 years after that, after being married, is when we started our business, like 1997, something like that.
Okay, so it sounds like you maybe had like 8 years between, kind of going working for a company to, starting your own business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
had a very good foundation at AT&T. Kind of really learned
Yeah.
how
Oh,
to work,
great company. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, work with other businesses,
Yeah.
learn how to negotiate and talk to decision makers and things like that. All the things you need to learn how to do when you're in business. And yeah, just really delighted to have been able to have done this for the last 30 years. Great.
Wow, really cool. So talk to us about the kind of the embryo of your family business. Just take us from kind of like the that final time at AT&T where you kind of just dreaming about what it would be like to be an entrepreneur and have your own company. Through like the founding and kind of the initial phases of your company's life.
Yeah, so even before we got married, my wife, who's very business savvy, as more than me, and we talked about, look, we wanted to start our own business. It would be a way for us to manage our lives better, manage our family better. We both wanted to revolve our work around our home life, not our home life around our work.
Yeah.
So we talked about it, and then when we had our first child, um, Karen left AT&T, and then when we had our twins, I left AT&T, and we started our business. And really, it was a quest for independence,
Mm.
more than anything else. I mean, it's a small business. It's just the two of us. We're not, we weren't taking over the world or anything. We were just trying to make sure we could um, really manage our lives, manage our sons, be with our sons. Not necessarily be gone all the time traveling, which with a big company like AT&T, we were traveling I was traveling a good bit, and really wanted to put an end to that. And so we're both kind of homebodies, and like where we live, and don't aspire to globetrot all over the world.
Yeah, no, that's really cool.
Never really.
So, when you founded your company, what was your what was your business proposition? Like, what did you want your company to stand for? What was it supposed to do? Where did it fit?
Well, I have to say it really was around our own personal vision for our lives.
Mm.
So that was, you say, like, oh, it was about my customers and I wanted to serve my customers. Of course it was
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
we
yeah,
couldn't be in business for 30 years without serving our customers.
yeah.
But the truth of it is we went into it because we wanted to kind of opt out of the kind of what you're acculturated to do. When you go to college, one of the big sells is, you're going to work for a company and you're going to climb the ladder and you're going to be
Right,
a C level. And this is what my kids were told. And I sent them to expensive colleges, right? And when you go to those colleges, that's part of the sell, right? And and we just decided, kind of like opt out of that and not buy into that. And so anyway, but what we do is we help large companies build out their networks. We do project management and consulting. So we're talking about data infrastructure, voice infrastructure, sort of the systems that underlie the connections between offices. So not desktop kind of stuff,
right.
but network infrastructure. So that's what we do, and it takes a specific type of knowledge, which is very helpful. But it's technical. So my engineering school that I bombed out of, actually, I must have remembered something to do this kind of work. But yeah, so and it's fulfilling, it's great. But we started it really as a vision, like looking at our life rather than looking outward, because we thought, look, we're already doing this for AT&T,
Yeah,
so why couldn't we do this for ourselves? Companies need this kind of support. They
right.
always have the expertise on site, on staff to do these kinds of projects. So we just kind of inverted it, and we're lucky enough to be good enough at sales, right? Because the
Yeah,
hardest part is not doing the project. It's not implementing the technology. The hardest part's always getting the customer,
yeah. Amen.
right? That's the
Right.
hardest part.
Yeah.
So, but we had done sales for AT&T, both of us, and so we were kind of
Okay.
we were accustomed to that kind of rough and tumble part of it, and have been able to kind of make it through.
Okay. So were you and your wife on the same sales team at AT&T? Or were you literally like, working together every day, or?
No, she was in Richmond, and
Okay.
I was up in DC. So she was, we weren't on the same team, but we were in the same region. So, in sales, you're aware of all the high
Sure.
performers. So I said, look at that woman down in Richmond. She's a
Yeah.
high performer. I've got to get her on my team. So we made our own team.
Yeah.
I swiped her away from the folks down there. So absolutely.
No,
And
I love that. So when you started your company, I mean, did the clientele just kind of come, or was it a struggle at first? I mean, how would you characterize that first year?
a lot of uncertainty and
Yeah.
a lot of hustle. Kind of like you're sweating.
Yeah.
You're not sure. Is this going to work? What am I going to tell my kids if this,
Yeah.
if dad's not going to bring home the bacon, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But there's a little bit of white knuckling. But as you know, John, a lot of it is activity levels in sales.
Yes.
You have to produce high activity levels in order to find qualified clients who want to work with you. So it was just a lot of canvassing, a lot of business development, and then and just high levels of activity so you could find those two or three opportunities that you could work on and bring home the bacon. Yeah.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, how would you characterize the life of the company? You know what I mean? Like, has it been a, pretty steady, kind of, upward climb? Did you go through a rough patch? I mean, just give us the highlights of what it's been like over these past couple decades, I guess.
So we've had really a very steady business for about 30 years,
It's
and the,
great.
the deal is this: anytime we lost a client or we were worried about the future, especially at the beginning, I would always say to my wife, like, look, we've always been successful. Like, we've always been able to get clients at AT&T. Why would that stop? Like, or it's like a Newton's law of motion: an object in motion tends to stay in motion. It's like,
Yeah.
why would all of a sudden we be unable to do this? Like, we're good at this. We've proven it over time, and that's turned out to be the case. That you're just you're habituated, right, to canvassing and developing business, and you just continue to do it. And that's really been keeping it simple, the key to our success, trying to stay confident. And the only time, of course, when it got rough was, of course, during COVID, which was, and that's actually, I won't go into that unless you want to, but that's when I really finished the book. So
Yeah.
when things slowed down over COVID and things were shutting down and all this business, I had all these notes of stories that I had, written down, and ideas like the mother of Catholic education, the first college named for a woman, even the first U.S. shrine to religious liberty, I believe, is Mount St. Mary's. So all these stories I then developed into a full scale book, and that took, year and a half, 2 years, and things were a little slow at work, and I was able to squeeze that in, and you made lemonade out of lemons, right? So that's what happened. I'm glad I did it, but I wouldn't want to go through that again.
Yeah, me neither. Well said. So you're building your company with your wife. Fortunately, you both have high sales acumen. You worked at, an industry leader at AT&T,
Yeah,
it's rolling along. Like you said, the momentum that you had at AT&T continued into your own company, which is awesome. But your dream was to orient your home life in a way where the home life w was the priority and the
yeah,
work kind of orbited around that.
yes.
Did you find that balance easy to strike? Because especially as an entrepreneur, it's very easy to say, look, I need to grind until, I feel like I'm comfortable, and I might never feel comfortable, and I'm just so I'm just going to keep grinding. I mean, did you find that that balance easy to strike, or did it take some time?
Well, I neglected to mention that I was born in Italy, and
Yeah.
I'm half Italian.
Yeah.
So I don't like working that much.
Yeah, that's good. That's
I,
good.
I like la dolce vita, right? I like to,
Yeah.
I like to have a good life outside of work. So
Praise God. Good.
yeah, so it was a good, for me, it wasn't hard. Like
Yeah.
I have a lot of things that I enjoy outside of work.
It's awesome.
So I never really found myself grinding so hard.
I love it, man.
And my
That's
wife
great.
reminds me of that all the time.
No, that's cool. So, tell us about your family. What are your kids like?
So my oldest son is in finance. He went to the University of Notre Dame. So we have that connection to Mary. Of course, Notre Dame means Our Lady.
Yes.
Both of the schools have a golden lady that hover above the university, which is awesome. Uh,
Yes.
we love Notre Dame. My quote about Notre Dame is everything is overpriced and everything is worth it. Uh, Somehow you go there and you're spending money like crazy,
Yeah.
and you're in the middle of Indiana, which shouldn't have Manhattan prices, but everything does.
Yep.
And then you walk away smiling, going, "Wow, this was great."
It
How
was worth it. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, no, we love Notre Dame, and we have a lovely daughter-in-law from Notre Dame. So he's married to a double domer, as they
It's great.
say. Got a couple of grandsons, so very grateful for that. And I have another son who went to Villanova, studied engineering at their engineering school, and he's doing great. He's working in the consulting business and up in Manhattan, and he also does comedy at night. So he does some comedy gigs at night. He's a funny guy, and
It's awesome.
yeah, so he's got his mom sense of humor for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. We'll have to get some of our Catholic Finance Association members out to hear his acts. I bet they're great.
That sounds good. That sounds good. And then I have another son who went to Catholic U, which we love. Catholic U, great school,
Yep.
great business school. He was an accounting major, went to work for Price Waterhouse, but then transferred over into the AI data storage area, and now he's doing sales in that area. I think he likes that a lot more than accounting.
Yeah. I bet.
More exciting,
Yeah.
and he's a great guy. Neither of my younger guys are married, but we're praying for that they find great young ladies and can do as their parents did, maybe, and realize that work is great, but there's a whole life outside of work where I think you're going to really find your true fulfillment and purpose. Is my thought.
No, I love that. I'm sure you're probably a fan, like I am, of Dr. Andrew Abella at the Bush School at Catholic
Oh
University of America, your son's alma mater.
yes,
And he's got this term he's using a lot, which I love. It's eutropelia. It's the joy of just doing something you enjoy for no other purpose than that you enjoy it. It sounds like you celebrate that too, which is great.
sounds very Italian. I totally agree with that. Yes, for sure.
Yeah, he's Maltese, not far away.
Yeah.
So no,
Well,
that's
we're
go ahead.
lucky that we get a lot of CUA professors coming to our local Legatus group, which we talked about
Yeah,
earlier,
yeah.
and they're often our speakers. And so, yeah, we're they got a great faculty there. We really,
Well,
really
since you brought it up, tell us a little bit about your journey in Legatus. The Faith and Finance Forum loves Legatus, and love to just hear about why you joined the chapter and what your experience in that organization's been like.
okay. So yeah, Legatus is a Catholic business persons group. My wife and I joined maybe 4 years ago. We've been kicking tires for probably 10 years. Steve Peruka, who you know, great guy. He'd been inviting us to join. The kids were, still in school. We just sort of kicked tires, and we were probably a big pain in the neck. We would come to a meeting every now and then. They were very generous about inviting us, and we weren't members. And then finally we joined, and we're really glad we did because, and that again was like right in that COVID time period because it's in person. And so it's a chance to have fellowship and friendship with other like-minded people, business people. Um, I think we have about 50 or so people in the group,
Yeah.
and we meet on Wednesdays, once a month, and usually have a great speaker and a great meal. So I'm a big fan of Legatus. My wife enjoys it. It's great fellowship. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's so good, and you have a particularly unique and strong chapter, and Steve and Debbie Peruk are legends in this space, and they've done such a great job building up the Baltimore chapter over all these years, along with others. It's of course it's a team effort, and do you think much about Baltimore and Maryland as the birthplace of American Catholicism beyond kind of the history you've already referenced, with Mount St. Mary's and,
Yeah.
and the establishment of the college? I mean, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the first Catholic Mass was celebrated in Maryland, not far from you, and the first Catholic Mass in the United States,
I
uh,
think
or,
that's
or
right.
or the territory that became the United States, was
Yep.
celebrated in Maryland, not far from you. Do I have that right?
I think that's right. I
Yeah.
think that was in Southern Maryland. I'm pretty sure
Yes. Yes.
down in that St. Mary's area, but I believe that is correct. Look, I think Baltimore, if you ever drive through Baltimore, it is a city with it gets terrible press, but it's got
Yeah.
incredible potential. Look
Yeah.
at it. It's right on the water.
It
The
does.
harbor's there. Um, it's right on major rail lines. It's right off 95. It has, beautiful suburbs, but also nature around it.
Yeah.
Maryland's Eastern Shore, the mountains. There's a lot right around Baltimore, and it's been, talked down for a while, and it's got problems. It's got big problems, but it could be poised for a tremendous comeback, especially with talk of reinvigorating industry, right? Because
Right.
Baltimore was always a manufacturing town, home of Bethlehem Steel and others, right? Domino's Sugar and all these
Yep.
different kinds of things. So I think it's poised for a comeback. I don't know if it'll be, the next 5 years or the next 50 years, but I think Baltimore could make a great comeback.
Yeah, I'm with you, John. I've had many good times, including with Steve Peruka, by the way,
Yeah.
at the Orioles games and the Ravens games, which are a great time. The USCCB meets in Baltimore every year, and a couple times I brought my family down for those meetings. And the Inner Harbor area, especially for a family, I think is like one of the great places to visit. Like you have that aquarium.
Mm-hmm.
You have all those historic sites, other museums and kind of cultural amenities. And it's just a great place to walk around, because you literally have the city like surrounding this like little bay. And it's the combination of the cool urban environment, the interest of that
Yeah.
with the natural beauty of the water. It's all right there. I love it.
Got Little Italy there too, right? You ever been there?
Literally.
A couple of blocks. It's not too big, but some good
Oh my
restaurants.
gosh, so many great restaurants too. You're right. Really good stuff.
Yeah.
Are you from I mean, how long have you lived in Maryland? Like, I mean, how long have you like
So I came over from Italy when I was a
yeah.
kid, just like a year or so old,
Yeah.
and then lived in the DC area, really not as Baltimore oriented.
Hmm.
Um, Grew up in the Silver Spring area, then went up to Mount St. Mary's for college,
Hmm.
and then when I got married, moved to Annapolis, which is it is incredible because it's only an hour from DC. Same with Baltimore, but there's so much natural beauty here. You've got the
Yeah.
bay, you've got the rivers, you got fishing and hunting, you've got you know anything you'd want in terms of being in the outdoors, which we really really enjoy, and our sons have enjoyed. So it's been a great place for to raise children.
Yeah. What's your family's immigration story? what prompted your parents to come to the United States?
Well, my mom's full Italian, so
Yeah.
and my dad was in the Navy,
Oh,
in
cool.
the yeah, in the U.S. Navy. So it was like
Yeah.
I say she was a war bride, but there was no war, and it was a make love not war kind of thing, and here I
Yeah.
am, right? You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
it is a happy ending, and we love Italy, we love going back
That's
and
cool.
visit. We went back with our parish on a on a tour, and it was of all the great monasteries and churches, and had a great experience there. Went to mass every day, and with about maybe 40 or 50 people from our parish about a couple of years ago. So we'll go back again. But
It's awesome.
yeah, great
Was
place.
your dad stationed in Naples? I know there's a big base there.
My dad was stationed at the NATO base in
Wow.
Naples.
Very
Yep,
cool.
yep, and I
Yeah.
was born on that base.
Were
Yes.
you really? Oh my
Yeah, yeah,
gosh.
oh, yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. What was his job in the Navy? What did he do?
He actually was a musician.
No kidding.
He was with the Navy band. My dad is a piano player,
Crazy.
and yeah, and very talented guy. And
Wow.
yeah, 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 yeah.
That's cool. I guess I didn't realize that was a job in the Navy. That's interesting. So like did he like perform at like ceremonial events and that kind of thing? I mean, like what was it like,
I
or
mean,
just like everything? Anytime you
yeah,
need
he
a
said he
musician.
got
Yeah.
to travel all
Yeah.
over Europe,
Wow.
North Africa, Middle East. Because there were, like you said, there's always some event where I guess maybe
Yeah.
a five-star general is getting an award or something,
Yeah.
and you have a band there. So I think he was involved in all that kind of stuff, and continued when he left the Navy. He continued to play professionally as a musician around the Washington D.C. area for my whole life. So he was a kind of a really great piano player. Yeah,
Wow, man, that's so cool.
yeah.
So let's just talk about your faith for a minute. I mean, like have you always been strong in the practice of your Catholic faith? Has always been a huge part of your life, or has there been kind of like seasons?
Well, I think what it was for me is I was really lucky. Like I said, I went to a high school named after Mary. I went to a college named after Mary, and I met a great wife
Mm,
who's been, and had a great mom, right? And so I've always had these wonderful women sort of looking over me and being around me. And when our sons were born, you kind of get recatechized. You kind of start to rethink everything again. And I think at that point it got more serious for me, and you realize like the world that we were living in, if there's really no guidelines, what are these kids going to do? They'll be pulled in so many different directions. They will not have an identity. So to find your identity in Christ, right, in the church, you're going to be a more effective person. You're going to be a more holy person. You're going to be someone who has a purpose. So and what I tell my sons, and I teach a faith formation class, I say the purpose of life is to be a hero.
mm,
Of course, the ultimate hero is Jesus Christ, but the purpose of your life is to be a hero, and that's what all the saints are, and the martyrs, and all the people that we look up to. And that's a very effective message to a young man. And I have three
right.
sons, and of course I teach a faith formation class to boys, middle school boys.
Yeah.
So that is a very powerful message, because it's a challenge, right? To say you've got to live up to being a hero. And I think guys want that. I think most young men want that, and they respond to that. And so I think that's where we go with it. And there's a lot of that in the book. There's a lot of imagery of Mary as a hero, as a dragon slayer, as the one who faces down a snake in Genesis 3:15. She shall crush the serpent's head. And then you see that's the first book in the Bible. And then in the last, you see, and the dragon stood before the woman to devour her child. When Mary is confronted by a dragon in the book of Revelation 12:6, right?
Mm,
So you see, Mary is really the prototype of a hero, of a dragon slayer, of the brave knight archetype, right? St. George, Perseus. These dragon slayer images really harken back to Mary, who was prophesied to crush the serpent, and who in Revelation rebuffs the dragon so that her child can be born, right? In that Revelation 12:6. So it's very interesting that the the birth of Jesus is revisited in the last, it's very fascinating to me at least, in the last book of the Bible. We go back to the gospel, right? And you're reliving this birth again, this birth in Bethlehem, except this time it's in front of the dragon. The woman defies the dragon, has her child, protects it, and of course helps face down a dragon at the end of time. So Mary has a wonderful role in our biblical history, which is sometimes thought of as our church history. That's not correct. It is in the Bible. The Catholic understanding of Mary is extremely biblical. What's changed is if you look at the Catholic Bible, Genesis 3:15, it says, "She shall crush the serpent's head." When you go to King James, right, what King James did was change the wording very slightly in different places in the Bible. And he says, "It or they shall crush the serpent's head." So then the prophecy in Genesis becomes almost unrecognizable in Revelation because it's a she, and at the end, it is a she who appears before the dragon, who has the child and defends it. Um, and so this is really, really interesting part of being Catholic and understanding Scripture, right? Which sometimes Catholics are accused of not understanding, but that just takes a little bit of a well, in my research for the book, I found, I discovered that for myself. That look, Saint Jerome translated the Catholic Bible in the third century. King James came along, 1,000 years later and changed a bunch of stuff. And you could say King James was right. I don't think so. I think Saint Jerome got it right when he translated it from the original Hebrew scripture. So anyway, those are all things that you find out when you write a book and you start to dig deep.
Yeah, wow, I love that. And I also like what you said about how, men are looking for a bigger purpose. I really believe that, and it's not to suggest that women aren't. I mean, of course, I think they are too, and I think society should challenge both men and women, more, especially the youth. But I guess, as two men talking and you so deeply involved in men's ministries and father to boys,
Yeah,
like I just for a long time I've thought that, the culture has I guess been too easy on young men and let them slide into like a lot of what we've seen over the past like 20 years or so, just like, the video games and the just the kind of the low expectations, the you just I don't know. It seems like we kind of lost like that ethos that's so tied into our nation's history to the men that founded Mount St. Mary's, for instance, that courage, that sense of adventure, and man, I
yeah.
wish we could get that back. I think we need to get that back, right?
Yeah, well, what I do in the first class is I'll hold up their phone, right? Or I'll hold up a phone and I'll say, like, this is a lie.
Yeah.
And then I'll hold up a Bible and I say, this is the truth, right?
Yeah.
And I'll let them know that, look, they're being lied to about almost everything. Let's start with food, right?
Mm.
And this is very, every guy loves to eat, right? But you're like,
Yes.
let's start with food. Do you think the food that you're being told to eat is actually food? Just look at the label, right? And so you kind of get them hooked that way. And then and of course it's not. And you look at the labels and it's just a bunch of stuff that's not food,
Mm.
right? And they have to be tuned into there's the world and then there's God's kingdom. There's the
Yeah.
truth and there's a lie. And then you say, look, do you really believe that you came from a monkey? Do you
Hmm.
believe that that's your ancestry? Do you really believe that? Do you believe that dinosaurs melted into the earth and created the fuel that we use in our cars? Do you believe that story? Right? That's an absurd story that we're told. It's in our history books. It's ridiculous. And so you slowly introduce them to the ways of the world that really don't make sense. And when you point them out, they start to get it really quickly. And I think that sort of conjures this instinct to defend, right? And that's a
Yes.
natural instinct for a guy to defend and to be vigilant. And so I think that's how I really that's how I work with them. And I think it works pretty well.
Oh, I love that, and I love that you're incorporating the faith into it because look, there's traditions outside of the church, which can lead to virtue and goodness the military tradition like your father was a part of. There's good stuff in business. I'm sure the sales leadership in AT&T, we're drivers and high achievers and smart people and creative people. So there's goodness, around there, but I don't think you can ever really capture, the fullness of life and what you're meant to be without a relationship with God and Jesus. I mean,
Yeah.
you need that. That's the piece that you can't live without, right?
Yeah, yeah. The world wants to draw us into this artificial space of the screens, right?
Yeah.
And that dictates the terms of reality. It tells us what our priorities are. It tells us most of all to be fearful, right?
Yeah.
And of course, the Word of God is the opposite, right? It's completely freeing, right? It frees you from fear, first of all. I think it tells us, I don't know, 500 and some times not to be afraid. And that's the way to see the world clearly, is to see it without fear. Not that there aren't things in the world that are bad. There are. But as men, we have to kind of put aside our fear and see things clearly. And then we make good decisions, right? I think the screens want to usher us into bad decisions without thinking about it, right?
Mm, mm,
And I think we have to slow down, get away from the phones, live
yeah.
reality, go climb a tree, go swim in the river, go. Men have to take some risks, start a business,
Yes.
do
Yes.
something that involves some type of reasonable risk. I don't advise anything crazy, but look, it's just a part of life. You can't live your life staring at a screen. It's just a terrible way to it's a way to have terrible anxiety, I think.
Yeah, and also like, being terrified of failure, you know what I mean? Like even in this conversation, I'm not gonna describe them. Failure is probably too harsh, but like
Yeah,
you've described a few episodes in your life where like it was just a wrong turn. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Like
yeah.
went worked at the World Bank, just it wasn't the right place. You know what I mean? Like you lasted 6 months, you went off and did something else which you were great at. I mean, it seems like these days, like a lot of young people are like they're so terrified of failure, and like if one thing doesn't work out, they'll be considered a loser or whatever. I mean, just if you study the lives of the great entrepreneurs, like I don't know, I just came across a Milton Hershey story the other day this week. I mean, that guy failed like at like 50 things before he started Hershey's and made it big. He was a total failure in everything he tried to do, and then all of a sudden he did the chocolate company and it clicked, right?
I couldn't agree more. I think mistake making in that way is kind of an engine for creativity, right? As
Yeah.
you never make mistakes, you can never create anything, right? Because there's just mistake making involved in it, and there's a taboo against making a mistake, and failing at something, failing a class, failing at your job, but sometimes that happens, and you can, that's a testament to our faith, right? We can make something good out of something bad, and that's part of our faith, right? That's the story of Jesus right there.
I
Yeah.
love that. So I'm guessing that Mount St. Mary's isn't the only like organization, philanthropy, charity that you're active in. What are some of your other passions when it comes to giving back?
So we're going to a dinner for our local classical Catholic school tomorrow. So we're very involved with Divine Mercy Academy.
Oh, I've heard of it. That's great.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They're in Pasadena, Maryland.
Yeah.
We're very passionate about our local Chesterton High School, which is in
Wow.
Annapolis, a great school, classical school as well. I think that's really the future of Catholic education, is
Yes.
getting folks back in touch with these classical ideas. Um, I'm involved with the Mount. I teach a faith formation class up at my local parish, which is St. John the Evangelist. Um, and I'm trying to think of anything else, but I think that's
Yeah, it's
probably
pretty
the big
good.
stuff that
Yeah.
we do. And what we
Yeah.
so I think I said we sponsor a mid at the
What,
Naval.
what does that mean to sponsor mid? What does that entail?
So when a new student comes to the Naval Academy, right, they have a program where it's been going on for many years, a tradition of a local family would sponsor them. So if they want to get away from campus on weekends, right, don't have to wear the uniform, can get a home cooked meal, can sit around the fire or whatever you're doing at home and be in a family environment. That's an opportunity they can take advantage of. And so we have a really great mid. He does come over, a good bit. We'll fix him a home cooked meal.
It's
We'll hang
awesome.
out. We'll talk. Yeah, and it gives him a break because when you're on campus, this is a different kind of college or school.
Yeah.
You got to wear the uniform everywhere. You
Yeah.
can't not wear the uniform, right? So I think just getting a break from that's probably, worth it, right?
And you being born on a naval base, that's certainly tied to your story. I mean,
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
that fits perfectly. The classical education stuff is so important. My children attended classical school as well here in Pennsylvania, and I'm a huge fan. But for our listening audience that isn't as tied into all that stuff as you and I are, why do you think that that's such an awesome offering, and why do you support it so strongly?
I think it's a very human education. In other words, you're expected to be able to sing, do art, speak publicly. It always cracks me up that we're a country that has freedom of speech, but everyone's greatest fear is public speaking.
Yeah,
That's always been a strange thing. And of
yeah,
course, public singing, that's even scarier than public speaking.
yeah. I'm so scared of that. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
taking it to another level. But when you go to these schools, you get to use your human faculties, right? Whereas I think in other schools, you learn reading and writing, which is important. But at these schools, you're learning reading, writing, arithmetic in the classical style, but you're also compelled to do art, to make art, to sing, right, to dance, to do all these very, very human things, within the Catholic tradition that are very beautiful and produce very well-rounded, really outstanding young people. So I think I mean, I'm preaching to the choir. When my kids were coming along, we did not have Divine Mercy Academy or Chesterton. So they went to the local Catholic schools, which were fine, which were good. But even at the time, I was lamenting that they were not reading, any of the classic texts, the church fathers. I mean, I think the local archdiocese need to come around to this, but I think it will be done slowly.
No, I'm with you. I went to Catholic schools, first through 12th grade, and the Catholic formation and education my children are receiving at a classical school is it's just totally different. You know what I mean? And the thing that I kind of regret the most, or I regret is probably the wrong term for it, the thing I wish I had had in my own Catholic education is just a much deeper exposure to the Catholic Church. To what it means to truly practice the faith day in and day out, just the majesty of the church's achievements and contributions to the world. Really strong apologetics, the ability to defend your faith and explain it well, which I just didn't. I'm probably not great at it now, but I'm better. But yeah, we don't have to worry about that with these products of classical Catholic education. These kids can do it all, and they can do it better than we can, I think.
It's so interesting that we're at a point in history where the family is saving the church. I think
Yeah.
it's folks like you, it's folks like the founders of these schools, which are, as I'm sure, just like ours. These are just mothers and fathers who
Yep.
decided I want a classical alternative, and then they founded these great schools, and then the archdiocese slowly is taking them in. But at first they were keeping them at arm's length, and so
Yes.
it's and you're seeing the same thing probably where you are. So it's amazing that the family is saving the church, I think.
Yeah, and I will say too that I know a number of Catholic superintendents that have it's kind of clicked,
Mhm.
and they're bringing in a lot of the principles from the classical education movement into even the diocesan schools, and we're seeing changes and positive growth in that sector as well. So look, I think generally speaking, this is a great time to be alive. You know what I mean? I think there's system wide like. A lot of the themes that you touched upon, John, the concerns about, the phones and the technology and some of the atrophy in the culture, like obviously I think most practicing Catholics recognize that, but like even outside of the church, even just like, regular secular people that are rational and can see the truth and differentiate that from fiction, they say it too. And I don't know, I think the future looks bright. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to be negative and pessimistic, but I'm not one of them. I think that we're in a time of restoration and renewal.
I completely agree with you. I think we see the same thing, that there's a death and resurrection going on, and it's happening as it does, kind of at this embryonic level, but it's building, and I think we're headed towards something good.
All right, brother. Well, listen, you've been so generous with your time. You're a busy guy. You're running a company. You got children. You got mids coming over on the weekends. You got all kinds of stuff cooking. But I'm so glad that mutual friends introduced us, John. You're an awesome guy. Great entrepreneurial story, great family story, great story of service, and your passion for Mount St. Mary's in Maryland, the first Catholic college in America.
Yes. Thank
is really inspiring.
John Knowles. You have a great show. Thank you for having me on.
All right, brother. God bless you. Have a nice weekend. Peace.
God bless you. Okay. Bye bye.